Hey y'all! I've mentioned it a few times already, but I am absolutely obsessed with the Last of Us franchise, both part 1 and part 2. The characters and the games just have such a big place in my heart and I absolutely adore them. And as you can see behind me, I managed to grab the complete edition. And I also got a Life is Strange PS4 game. Do I have a PS4? No. Do I have a PS5? No. But I still picked up the games because why not? Now, today's video is not just going to be about this, but I do want to mention it just because it's so cool and it's the first piece of physical merch that I have of this game, really. Along with that, you guys see a little empty shelf over here, and I'm going to go ahead and put the steel book that is so freaking beautiful in our little art stand because it's clearly a piece of art. However, like I said, today I'm going to be talking about the games, mostly part 2 because it's a longer story and it's a lot more complex than the original. And I'm not going to be diving into any of the show right now. However, I do have a video planned where I'm going to be talking about the show. And today I'm going to be talking very, very positively, as you could probably tell. However, when I talk about the show, I will not be talking very positively because, and I think the biggest reason for that is just this game is just so important to me, and the show just does not reflect the game as I feel like it should, and it was done so dirty. But anyways, let's talk about the game. Like I mentioned, part 2 is definitely my favorite, but part 1 is still such a beautiful story. Just when talking about the games, I'm talking about obviously the re-released part 1 and part 2, because if I tell you that it looks beautiful and you think I'm talking about the PS3 edition, obviously I might not be entirely correct about that, but the PS5 editions, absolutely gorgeous. The storyline is just so amazing. I think it's one of those perfect games that even if it had been left alone and there was no part 2, it would be such a beautiful storyline. I also think that the character development between Ellie and Joel, separately and together, is just so well done. And I have heard about what The Last of Us was supposed to be, based off of Neil Druckmann's, like, what he said and the original concepts that were pitched, and that is absolutely insane. I don't really want to touch on that just because I don't know anything about him. I don't know anything about a lot of the development, you know, but kind of weird, kind of sus. But anyways, Joel is also just such a fun character to play. It reminds me, almost kind of foreshadowing a little bit, he's a lot like Abby in a way. You know, you have this really strong badass character and he's so fun to play with. Again, back to the character development though, I feel like all the characters that you meet along the way, it's really funny because I like to joke that every time there's a 3rd or 4th character added, it's too much for the game, so they have to do away with them somehow, and that's why everyone keeps getting killed off. But I love the way that they impact Ellie, and even at the end of the game where she's saying Tess died and Riley died and Sam dying, all of those have such a big impact on her that have made her the person who she is throughout the entirety of the story. It is such a beautifully well put together game. Winter in part 1 is such an uncomfortable part of the game, and I honestly, I hate it, but I love it at the same time because it is such a sad reality, and I love that they kind of put this in there very briefly, I guess, because it is kind of talked about at the end with Marlene. It's not really talked about anywhere else. Like, even with Tess, there's never any indication of something like that being brought up. And ever since someone pointed that out to me, that in an apocalypse situation, women are like gonna be attacked, and it's like such a scary thing to be a woman. I think that having this in the storyline is so important for that exact reason. And like I said, I hate playing Winter. I absolutely despise it. That last scene when the house is burning down, I cannot stand it. But it shows a really sad reality, especially to men who may be playing the game, that don't really understand that concept. Maybe they're just completely ignorant to stuff like that, which I know there are a lot of people, even women. But like I said, it's such a hard topic to really talk about, and yet they put it into the story, they integrated it, and it came together so beautifully and tragically at the same time. Now, I think that about wraps up what I want to say about part 1. I'll bring it up throughout the rest of the video. However, part 2, again, just getting it out of the way, such a beautiful game, amazing storyline, and the characters are so amazing. Like, I find new things to be amazed about with this game all the time. I've played it maybe a handful of times in its entirety. I've watched a few playthroughs, probably another handful of playthroughs, and every time I'm like, I find there's new hidden dialogue or just a bunch of random things that I hadn't noticed or didn't put together at some points. There's been a few times where I have like this huzzah moment where I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe these two things happened or whatever. Now, I don't want to start off with a negative, but I'm gonna start off with a negative. Tommy's character is very confusing to me. I don't like him, and that's not to say he's not a sexy man. Don't be putting words in my mouth. But his character is confusing. He makes no sense to me. At the beginning of the game, he is trying to convince Ellie not to go to Seattle. Spoiler alert, right after Joel's death, and yet he goes the next morning by himself. Then, at the end of Ellie's day 3, he's trying to convince Ellie that we're gonna have to leave Abby alive. Too bad. Sorry. And then at the end of the game, in the farm, he's mad at Ellie for not killing Abby. Make it make sense? What is he talking about? Make it make sense. What do you want? First, he didn't want her to go to Seattle. Then he goes to Seattle. Then he was telling her to be okay with Abby not dying. And then he's mad at Ellie not killing Abby? I don't know. He's just... Okay, maybe it's just like the grief, okay? You could blame it all on grief. He doesn't know what he wants. He's also confused. He's going through a lot. But it still doesn't make sense to me. He bothers me. I will say that the game doesn't really pick up until Ellie Day 2, even 3. I feel like the days before that really drag on, and it's just a whole lot of nothing almost. I feel like there's a lot of sections of the game that could have been maybe done away with, but considering that both Abby and Ellie's day 1 are significantly longer than the rest, I guess it's just for storyline purposes. Maybe they just had a lot that they wanted to say within those days, and then the rest is kind of just wrapping it up. And one thing that I forgot to mention is the new chronological order. I'm not going to talk about that for a little bit just because it's newer, so I'll save that for the end, you know, that way I could space out my thoughts. The other thing that I really, really love about this game is on your first playthrough, you are confused. You do not know what is happening. You are playing as Ellie and you are learning as Ellie partially, right? That is the whole point of the flashbacks. The flashbacks are showing you what Ellie is thinking about and what she's reflecting on and why she's doing what she's doing. Again, I guess I'll bring it up again later, but that's what makes this story so beautiful. It's like you're learning as you're going and you're being reminded of things and you're really in her head. You know exactly what Ellie's thinking of and where she's at as she's progressing, trying to get revenge for Joel. Another really interesting thing about this game that wasn't in the first game is the whole story behind the WLF and the Seraphites. I feel like their story, the beginning of their stories, the truths, everything about them is so interesting and we barely learn anything about it. I've been told that this is a bad idea because apparently this is what ruins franchises. I would love to see a spin-off game where you play as a Seraphite or something and when it was first in the uprising and you learn exactly what's happening and I don't know the main girl's name, but the one who is the almighty feel her love, whatever. I would love to learn more about her, like who the hell is she? And Lev mentions her very briefly and about her scriptures and stuff like that and how it wasn't always supposed to be violent and that the Seraphites are not at all what she had intended them to be. And again, it is such an interesting story and we learn basically nothing about it. Like, we just scrape the iceberg and there's still so much to learn about them. This is gonna get kind of controversial, but I honestly don't think we need or should have a Last of Us Part 3. Not having to do with Ellie, not having to do with Jackson, anything like that. I mean, maybe we could include Jackson. There's plenty of other people there that, you know, we could tell stories of, but we don't need any more of Ellie's story. Her story is done. Doing anything else would just be dragging it on. What I would like to see is a completion of the half-baked stories that they've already given us. We already have the Seraphites, the WLF, even the Rattlers at the very end of the game. We see their demise, but we don't know anything about them up to that. I mean, they're slave owners, quite frankly, but and they're probably not very good people. But I think it would be kind of interesting, maybe a game where you play as one of the slaves or something. I mean, we get a lot of their notes and we hear some of their talk, but I think it'd be really interesting to learn more about them as well. And again, it's more of like a gross concept, kind of going back to Winter in part 1, but it's still interesting. Even them, that would also be a really interesting concept, which is delved into in the show. The only way I could see a part 3 possibly happening is if it has to do with Abby and Lev getting to the Fireflies or something to do with that. Even if it happens to start off with them being in the Rattler camp and then the whole thing happening with Ellie, and then flash forward to them trying to find the Fireflies and whatnot, and then maybe it leads them to some kind of journey revolving the Fireflies or a task for the Fireflies, something like that. That I could see happening. That is the only way I see part 3 happening without it being bad, quite frankly. Now, let's talk about the chronological. I have since completed it. I do think it was good in some senses, but I don't think it's at all better to the original story. At all. It does not compare. Honestly, in my opinion, this seems kind of like a jab at trying to make people like the show a little bit more. And I know I'm not going to talk about the show right now entirely, but I will just mention that one of my gripes with the show was that they put all the flashbacks together in one episode and just called it a day. That's not the point of the flashbacks. That's not... You didn't get the point of the story. You're completely misunderstanding everything if you think you could just put all the flashbacks together in one episode. That makes no sense, you guys. And I think this was the game's way of being like, hey, it's okay if they're all together in one area, you know? Right at the beginning of the game, you get all the flashbacks because they're flashbacks. If the chronological was the original, it would be kind of like Death Stranding, where it's a walking simulator for the first 50 hours, you know? Like, you're just getting flashbacks and you're not really doing anything. I would say the only time you're really doing anything is when you're with Joel in the hotel, and even then it's like a bloater immediately first thing in the game. Like, I get that it's not for your first time playing, but even then, like, that doesn't make any sense either. On top of that, I feel like a lot of it wasn't chronological enough. The days, I was really expecting it to be like flipping between Abby and Ellie, like back and forth constantly. But there was day 2 where Abby is already leaving the hospital and Ellie's barely going in. Like, I thought the whole point was that you're supposed to be interrogating Nora at the same time that Abby is fighting the Rat King in one room over, you know? Like, that's the whole point. But if Abby's walking out when Ellie's walking in, that doesn't make any sense either. And I get, obviously, you're not gonna have a split screen and to be doing 2 things at once, but it's still not chronological enough. Like, it just doesn't make enough sense to me. When I first heard the news about this chronological thing, I was actually in Florida, but I had anticipated it to be, like I just said, a lot of back and forth. Like, you'll get maybe 10-20 minutes with Abby and then you switch back to Ellie and, you know, maybe an hour max, but it felt like you were doing half of the day and then switching to the other character and then doing another half of the day. Like, that didn't, I think you didn't switch more than twice in a day. Like, they just split it in half. Like, come on, like, what is that? Like I said, the flashbacks now make no sense. The whole point is that you're getting her emotions, you're understanding what she's going through within that day, what she's thinking about. After she's made it to Seattle and they're now settled into the theater, she just learned about Dina being pregnant. She's thinking about this really good time with Joel when they went to the museum on her birthday, you know? Like, she's having a happy moment and she's thinking about Joel in a positive light, you know? Like, that's where her brain is at. Then the following day, she's thinking of Joel in a little bit more negative side where they were arguing about what really happened at the Firefly Hospital. And then on the third day, this is what happened at the Firefly Hospital, you know? Like, I don't know. It makes so much less sense. I think if they had just done the chronological correctly, I wouldn't have such a big gripe about it, but because it was so chronological, all the flashbacks together at the beginning, and then the days were just kind of like big chunks split up, it didn't make sense to me. I wish they had just, I don't know, I wish they had chopped it up a little bit more. That's not to say that I don't love the story. I love the story. I love the chronological. I mean, it makes sense for the most part. I will say that it kind of ruins some of those moments though. Like when you first start playing as Abby at the end of tracking lessons, where it has that cut between her seeing her dad crying and then to killing Joel. That, like, yeah, that's supposed to be together, and yet they split it up. Again, Abby's scenes are also important to what she's thinking of. Like, she's thinking of Owen, she's thinking about the aquarium, you know, in different circumstances, all that stuff. It's important. I don't know why they did that. If they just, like, I guess the flashbacks aren't important at all to the story. Totally. I guess that makes sense. Sorry, it didn't click until now that obviously the flashbacks have no importance. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really hope I don't come off as negative. I feel like I said a lot more negative than I did positive, but I want you to know I absolutely adore this franchise, and they actually just announced the scripts for the games, and I will be purchasing that. Thank you very much. It will be in my cart, and here's my credit card. I do hope to eventually get a PlayStation so that I can actually play the game. That would be nice. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Stay tuned for the one that I was telling you about, where I'm going to be talking about the show. I feel like I have a lot more to say about the show, and like I said, it's a whole lot of negative. So Craig Mazin, if you are looking for someone to contact, hit me up, because I will make season 3 phenomenal, I promise. Stay tuned for that one, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!